Recorded Books and RB Digital present Dawn of Infamy, a sunken ship, a vanished crew, and the final mystery of Pearl Harbor, by Stephen Harding, narrated by Richard Ferrone. A quote by Joshua Slocum. Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm hath bound the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea. And now, without having wearied my friends, I hope, with detailed scientific accounts, theories, or deductions, I will only say that I have endeavored to tell just the story of the adventure itself. Prologue. On the afternoon of Monday, December 1st, 1941, Captain Bertil Carlson leaned over the bridge wing of the steamship Cynthia Olsen and ordered deckhands to let go the mooring lines holding the small freighter to a pier in Seattle, Washington. Carlson, a 64-year-old master mariner, then ordered slow ahead on the engine order telegraph. Minutes later, her single screw churning the waters of Elliott Bay, the 22-year-old ship set out on the 135-mile passage up Puget Sound, bound for the Pacific Ocean. It was a familiar route for both Carlson and his vessel. Though the ship had sailed the Atlantic and Caribbean in her youth, for the first 7 months of 1941, Cynthia Olsen had plied the waters of the West Coast as a lumber carrier. Home-ported in San Francisco, she made regular calls at Olympia, Tacoma, and other Pacific Northwest ports, often with Carlson in command. Once her decks were covered with stacks of freshly sawn timber and her holds filled with massive rolls of newsprint, she'd sail for Oakland, Los Angeles, or San Diego. It was a fairly mundane routine, but one that had proven dependably profitable for her owner, San Francisco's Oliver J. Olson Steamship Company. But that routine changed abruptly in early August when the Olson Company signed a contract with the U.S. Army. That service had launched a hurried military construction effort in Hawaii in response to the increasing threat of war in the Pacific, and Cynthia Olsen and ships like her were needed to haul the timber that would become the barracks, warehouses, and aircraft hangars of what the War Department hoped would be a newly invigorated Hawaii Defense Force. Cynthia Olsen had embarked on her first timber-hauling passage to Pearl Harbor on August 22nd, completing each leg of the trip in 9.5 days under the command of Captain P.C. Johnson. A second trip in late September and early October worked out equally well, and on November 18th, the Army chartered the vessel outright. Now, on the first day of December, she was setting out again, with Carlson as a last-minute substitute for an ailing Johnson. Sharing the bridge was first mate William Buchtela, himself a last-minute replacement, and together the two men hoped to better the previous total passage time by at least a day. What neither mariner could know was that their ship and the 35 men aboard her were embarking on their final voyage. Even as Cynthia Olsen chugged slowly toward the sea, events were unfolding that would pit the ship and her crew against a deadly foe, mark the beginning of a new front in a global conflict, and spark one of the most enduring nautical mysteries of World War II. Part 1. Chapter 1. A Ship Fine and Sturdy. The vessel Bertil Carlson and his ill-fated crew took to sea that day in early December 1941 had started life a continent away, and by the time she set out on her last voyage, she had already spent some 2 decades plying both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It hadn't been an easy life, and she was starting to show her age. A product of Wisconsin's Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company, the vessel was laid down in the late summer of 1918 as Coquina, one of some 331 ocean-going freighters built for the U.S. Shipping Board, the USSB, by firms throughout the Great Lakes. Of essentially identical design, these steel-hulled ships came to be known as Laker-class vessels, both because of where they were built and because many initially bore names beginning with the word lake. The ships were similar in layout to the medium-sized ocean-going Fredrikstad freighter design developed early in World War I by neutral Scandinavian shipbuilders, an economical type that was well-suited to prefabrication and mass production. Both attributes were particularly important, given that the first 91 Lakers had been contracted for by British companies planning to put them into service in support of the United Kingdom's war effort. When America entered the conflict in April 1917, the U.S. government abrogated the British contracts, and the following month, the USSB requisitioned the vessels for wartime cargo duty on behalf of the United States and her allies. The USSB and, after September 1917, a subordinate agency called the Emergency Fleet Corporation, the EFC, ultimately awarded contracts for the construction of 346 Laker-class ships. When this number is added to the requisitioned British-ordered vessels, it renders the Laker program the largest standard-type shipbuilding effort undertaken by the United States during World War I. The ships were of 6 variants, which differed slightly in gross tonnage and overall length. Each variant was given a type number, with the 33 examples ultimately manufactured by Manitowoc Shipbuilding being designated Design 1044. These solidly built and dependable craft had an overall length of 251 feet, a beam of 43 feet 6 inches, and a loaded draft of 23 feet. Each ship weighed in at 3,400 deadweight, 2,800 gross, and approximately 1,280 net tons. Though they differed in small structural details, all featured the standard Laker 3 islands silhouette, raised forecastle and poop deck, and a large amidships deckhouse with a single funnel set just aft of the bridge. The vessels had 2 large cargo holds, one forward and one aft of the deckhouse, each of which was accessed through 2 hatches, one directly behind the other. Each hold was served by 2 sets of twin booms. 2 of the booms for each hold were fixed to king posts, one set of which was attached to the forward part of the deckhouse and one set to the aft. The other 2 booms for each hold were attached to taller masts, one set into the forecastle and one into the poop. Each boom had its own dedicated winch. The Design 1044 Lakers were built with cellular double bottoms, single-width side hull plates, and 4 deck levels. The upper or main deck stretched from stem to stern and was the structure upon which the hatch covers rested and from which the amidships deckhouse rose. The bridge deck, the house's first habitable level up from the main deck, contained the main saloon, the engineer's mess, the galley.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.